Okay. Good morning, students. In this video, we'll discuss about the February and October Revolution. So, in this, as we discussed about yesterday, as we discussed about in previous lecture, that about the Russian Revolution and how Russia received a crushing defeat in Eastern Front, and the soldiers, those who were fighting in the war, they were frustrated. The people in the workshop, the people in the offices or even the factories, they were called upon for the war. Able workers joined the war. That's why there was a great shortage of workforce. Women were frustrated due to the rise of bread and commodities were increased. Rise of daily day-to-day commodities were not possible to meet because most of the grains were diverted toward the war front. In that situation, people having no options, George's oppressive policy revolted, encouraged them to revolt against it as well. And Tsar, without the consenting of elected parliament called Duma, it took part in the war, resulting it received a crushing defeat, and people were an army also boycotted the Eastern Front, and they destroyed everything, crops and everything. Millions of people became refugees. In that situation, it prepared the situation for the revolt. So upcoming part will discuss about the two important incidents, February and October Revolution in this module. So we'll discuss about one by one. Here geographically, Petrograd divided into two different parts, a left side and the right side. River Neva in between them. River Neva left bank side includes the Winter Palace, the official buildings, including the place where Duma met. So Parliament, official buildings and rulers, Winter Palace also part of it, this fashionable areas. So that is one side of the city. Then other side of city include the right bank where workers quarters and factories were there. It means that all common people used to live over there, and factories and other things were there. So this was a division of two parts. The orders were issued from the side of fashionable areas, and these were the followers of the orders. So these group of people, those who are living in the right bank of the corners, were frustrated because their day-to-day means of livelihood were in danger because of the revolution, because of that war. The time of crisis. In February 1917, food shortage were deeply felt in the workers' quarter, as I told you earlier, because most of the grains were diverted towards the war front. The winter was very cold. War had been exceptional. There has been exceptional frost and heavy snowfall because of it. That's why the winter was very cold. Normally it happened in Russian part. Parliamentarians wishing to preserve elected government and the desire to dissolve the Duma. On 22nd February, a lockout took place in a factory. Factories में तालाबंदी हो गई. On the right bank, next day workers were in sympathy. In many factories, women led strikes. This came to be called as International Women's Day because most of the incident was lost by most of the protests were launched by the women, and they were supported by it. That's why most of because of the incident, this day is known as International Women's Day on 22nd February. This came to be called as International Women's Day. Demonstrating workers crossed from the factory quarters to the center of the capital, like Nevsky Prospekt. As this stage, no political party was actively organizing movement because it's a commonly mass movement and common people launched all these activities together. As the fashionable quarters and official buildings were surrounded by workers, the government imposed a curfew over there. Demonstrators disappeared by the evening. Throughout the day they were there, but in the evening they were disappeared. But they came back on 24th and 25th again. The government called out the cavalry and police to keep an eye on them, but it was unstoppable. On February 25th, that was on Sunday, the government suspended the Duma. that was selected parliament, some sort of representation of the people side was there in the Duma, so that was suspended by the ruler. Then politicians spoke against the measure against the activities. Demonstrations returned in force on to the streets of the bank of 26th. On the 27th, the police headquarters were ransacked. The streets were thronged with people raising slogan about the bread, wages, better hours, and democracy. All these things they want because they were completely against the monarchical system, because of the monarchical system, their basic means of livelihood were in danger. And the government tried to control the situation and called the cavalry once again. However, the cavalry refused to fire on the demonstrators. घुड़सवार सैनिकों ने भी फायर करने से पर मना कर दिया because they knew about the situation about the country. So an officer was shot at the barracks of regiment, and 3 other regiments motioned, voting to join the strike workers. By the evening, soldiers and striking workers had gathered to form a Soviet or council in the same building at the Duma met. This was Petrograd Soviet. This was called Petrograd Soviet. Here is the meeting of Petrograd Soviet, which was organized in February 1917. Striking workers had gathered to form a Soviet or council in the same building of Duma met. This was the Petrograd Soviet. Because of that incident, because of that happened, they were the very next day a delegation went to see Tsar. Military commanders advised him to abdicate. He followed their advice and advocated on 2nd of March. Soviet leaders and Duma leaders formed a provincial government to run the country. Russian future would be decided by a constituent assembly elected on the basis of universal adult franchise. Petrograd had led the February Revolution that brought down the monarchy in February 1970. In that manner, monarchy was ended and an elected council was established and who look after the issues of the country. All this were happened in February Revolution, but the incident was not stopped because the power of the ruler was snatched, so he was not kept quiet. During the time period after the February Revolution, army officials, landowners and industrialists were influential in the provincial government. Restrictions on public buildings, public meeting and associations were removed. Soviet like Petrograd Soviet were set up everywhere, though no common system of election was followed. In 1917, the Bolshevik leader Vladimir Lenin, he returned to Russia from exile. He was in exile during the World War period, but in 1917 he came back again. He and Bolshevik opposed the war since 1914. They were because of that he was exiled from Russia because he was opposing the war. Now he felt it was time for Soviet to took over war. He announced April thesis, under which he demanded 3 things: end of war should be ended. Second, land to be transformed to the peasants and banks to be nationalized. Earlier, banks was a private property and bank owners and industrial owners, they used to manipulate the things happen in the country. So he wanted bank to be nationalized. Bolshevik party was renamed itself as the Communist Party. Most other party members were surprised by April thesis. His own party workers were surprised by the April thesis. They thought that the time was not yet ripe for a socialist revolution. And a provincial government needed to be supported. But the development of the subsequent months changed their attitude and they were in favor of socialist revolution. Through the summer, the workers' movement spread in industrial area. Factory committees were formed, which began questioning the way of industrialists ran their factories. मीन्स जैसे फैक्ट्री जो इंडस्ट्री चला रहे थे उसके ऊपर उन्होंने क्वेश्चंस करना शुरू कर दिया. ट्रेड यूनियंस ग्रो इन नंबर्स. सारी फैक्ट्रीज में ट्रेड यूनियंस बन गई. ट्रेड यूनियंस फॉर द ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस हु वर्क फॉर द राइट ऑफ वर्कर्स, जो मालिकों के खिलाफ वर्कर्स के राइट में काम करती है. सो ऐसे ट्रेड यूनियंस फैक्ट्रीज में बन गई. मजदूरों की कमेटी बन गई. सोल्जर्स कमेटी वर आल्सो फॉर्म्ड इन आर्मी. इन जून अबाउट 500 सोवियत सेंट representatives in all Russian Congress of Soviets. As the provincial government saw its power reduce and Bolshevik influence grow, it decided to take stern measures against the spreading discontent. प्रोविंशियल गवर्नमेंट को लगा कि उनके खिलाफ साजिश हो रही है, तो बोल्शेविक साजिश कर रहे हैं और बोल्शेविक का इन्फ्लुएंस बढ़ रहा है, तो उनके इन्फ्लुएंस को कम करने के लिए उन्होंने अपकमिंग मेजर्स उठाए हैं. Popular demonstrations staged by the Bolsheviks in July 1917 were sternly repressed. Many Bolshevik leaders had to hide और फ्ली. बहुत सारे बोल्शेविक वर्कर्स को या तो छुपना पड़ा या फिर भाग जाना पड़ा, क्योंकि सरकार जो प्रोविंशियल गवर्नमेंट थी उनके खिलाफ एक्शन ले रही थी. मीनवाइल इन द कंट्री साइड पीजेंट्स एंड देयर सर्क. उस समय गाँव में क्या हो रहा था? पीजेंट्स एंड देयर सोशलिस्ट रिवोल्यूशनरी लीडर्स प्रेस्ड the press for redistribution of land. As I told you about, it was one of the plan of April thesis. Peasants seized. Land committees were formed to handle this situation. Encouraged by the socialist revolutionaries, peasants seized land between July and September 1917. किसानों ने इस दौरान ज़मीनों को छीनना शुरू कर दिया. जमींदारों से जो ड्यूक्स और नोबल्स के हाथ में ज़मीन थी उनको उन्होंने लेना शुरू कर दिया. दैट हैपेंड इन विलेज एरियाज अकॉर्डिंग टू द लेनिन्स प्लान. देन अक्टूबर रिवॉल्यूशन इन 1917. अक्टूबर रिवॉल्यूशन 1917 में, इसके बाद के जो टाइम पीरियड था आफ्टर सेप्टेम्बर, एज इट हैपेंड इन विलेज एरियाज लाइक लैंड वाज स्नैच, फैक्ट्री कमेटी वाज एस्टैब्लिश इन सिटीज़, आर्मी कमेटी आल्सो एस्टैब्लिश. सो ऑल दिस एक्टिविटीज़ वर अगेंस्ट द एक्टिविटीज़ ऑफ द केरेंस्की और प्रोविंशियल गवर्नमेंट. As the conflict between the provincial government and Bolshevik grew, Lenin feared the provincial government would set up dictatorship. लेनिन को लगा कि केरेंस्की गवर्नमेंट जो तानाशाह बन जाएगी, क्योंकि उसके खिलाफ बोल्शेविक्स ने मूवमेंट शुरू कर दिया था. इन सितंबर ही बिगेन डिस्कशंस फॉर अपराइजिंग गवर्नमेंट अगेंस्ट द गवर्नमेंट. सरकार के जो नीतियों के खिलाफ तो उसने विद्रोह करने का शुरू कर दिया. Bolshevik supporters in the army, Soviet and factory workers brought together. ये सब लोग जो कि विद्रोह कर रहे थे, they were all revolting, came together. इन सबको ये सब साथ में आ गए. केरेंस्की गवर्नमेंट का कोलैप्स होना. With the able commander named Leon Trotsky को अपनी तरफ मिला लिया. The uprising began on 24th October. That's why revolution happened in 24th October, that in the month of October. That's why this period was known as October Revolution. Sensing trouble, Prime Minister Kerensky had left the city to summon troops. Next morning, military men loyal to the government seized the building of two Bolshevik newspapers. Pro-government troops were sent to take over telephone and telegraph offices and protect the Winter Palace. In a swift response, the Military Revolutionary Committee ordered its supporters to seize government offices and arrest ministers. Late in the day, the ship Aurora, it was one of the biggest, this ship played a significant contribution in the Russian Revolution, sailed the Winter Palace. Over other vessels sailed down River Neva. They crossed over River Neva and entered to the administrative areas where Winter Palace and other things were there. Took over various military points. The key military points were captured by the Leon Trotsky with the help of soldiers on various military points. By nightfall, the city was under the committee's control and the ministers surrounded. सारे मंत्रियों को घेर लिया गया। जो जो केरेंस्की गवर्नमेंट के सपोर्टर्स थे उन सबको बंदी बना लिया गया एक तरीके से। At a meeting of all Russian Congress of Soviet in Petrograd, the military approved the Bolshevik action. Military ने Bolshevik action को approve कर लिया because Leon Trotsky was the military commander. He was inside of Bolsheviks, and this uprising was done against Kerensky's provincial government. Uprising took place in other cities. अदर सिटीज़ में भी ऐसे अपराइजिंग हुए जहाँ पे केरेंस्की गवर्नमेंट, जहाँ पे प्रोविंशियल गवर्नमेंट्स के सपोर्ट में जो लोग थे उनके खिलाफ मूवमेंट शुरू हो गया। देयर वर हैवी फाइटिंग ऑन रोड्स एंड अदर प्लेसेस, स्पेशली इन मॉस्को, बट बाय डिसम्बर बोल्शेविक्स कंट्रोल्ड द मॉस्को पेट्रोग्राड एरिया। बोल्शेविक्स ने मॉस्को पेट्रोग्राड एरिया को पूरी तरह से कंट्रोल कर लिया। दैट्स इट। इन दैट मैनर अक्टूबर, in the month of October, by the end of December, the movement started in October Revolution. Then Kerensky government for rise हुई, इसके बाद में उसका पतन हो गया। In that manner, the Russian Revolution was under control, but things was not stopped here. The changes started to occur after October that led to the country into civil war. That we'll discuss about in upcoming modules. So that's it for the video.